You boys know what's about to happen to you. You leave now.
Some consider these traits to be toxic, such as undesirable in the men of today. We consider these traits such as these not only to be desirable, but to be appreciated and celebrated. Welcome to the Toxic Male Appreciation Show, hosted by and La Reina Creole. Welcome to the safe space for the toxic male.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Toxic Male Appreciation Show with me, Reina Creole, and my co-host of Positive Fandom. How are you doing, my dear?
I'm doing very well. Enjoying the summer weather, Lorena. It's warm here in the Northeast, and I know it's warm where you are.
Oh, yeah.
And things are heating up on our show, Lorena. Things are getting hot.
I know, right? It's like every show, temperature just keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. That's why we have less clothes on today.
That's right.
Oh man, but I'm so loving doing the show. Love doing the show with you and loving just how many of you have been watching the show here on Twitch and then watching the video replay or premiere over on YouTube. So we so appreciate your support of the show. Definitely, drop us a line. Let us know how you're liking the show, who you want to see like featured on the show. I'd love to hear from you guys because we enjoy doing this concept. It's a lot. It's a lot of fun. It's very informative and just great positivity, around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means a lot to both of us that you all are enjoying it. So we'll continue to do it if you guys keep watching.
Yes.
For sure. So
absolutely. And I'm especially excited about these next two shows we have coming up today and of course next Thursday, because today we are actually going to talk about a famous father and son duo. But before we get started, I'm going to let introduce herself and her channel, and I will likewise, especially for you folks who are new to seeing us here.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Otter from Positive Fandom. My YouTube channel is Positive Fandom as well as my Twitch channel. I do stream with Lorena here on the Toxic Male Appreciation Show, as well as the Toxic Femmes on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also find me on the 1/6 Scale Man Network, sometimes on Wednesdays and Thursdays on Say What or Uncivilized Scoundrels. I also stream with Tom and Andre on Midnight's Edge in the morning on Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And on the weekend, sometimes you can find me streaming with Robert Meyer Burnett on the PGS Network. But I also have a live Sunday brunch show on Positive Fandom where I do all the parlay and the fandom. So please do check that out at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays.
Absolutely. Her brunch show is amazing. It's so much fun. Yeah. I wish I could watch the whole darn thing. It's like I get to watch a little bit before I have to run into church, but it's so fun. It's relaxing. It's enjoyable. You definitely do not want to miss that show. So your girl, of course, I'm Reina Creole. I appear on Toxic Femininity along with her over on Midnight's Edge. You can also see several of my shows, the Welcome to Florida show on Sundays at 8 p.m. Of course, we have this show here on Twitch on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Then also on Saturdays, I usually have a theme park stream. And you kind of have to watch for the announcement either on Twitter or on YouTube of exactly what time it goes off because the subject kind of varies. But this Saturday, we're going to be hanging out at Epcot at the Japan Pavilion because we are going shopping for anime swag and all kinds of tchotchkes over
Yes.
there. It's going to be so much fun. It's one of my favorite pavilions, and I love sharing it. I've been visiting that pavilion since I was a kid, so it's one of my favorite places to go, especially with all the candy that they that they have, all the Japanese candy that they have over there. I absolutely freaking love it. Also, I appear on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Drunk 3PO's Basement for the Dark Council show. Yes, yes. So that is permanently on Drunk 3PO's Basement, where I hang out with, of course, Drunk 3PO, Demogeni, the Gospel According to Mark with a C, Fatal J, Abu Nas, and Lord Callus as well. One day we got to get you on the show.
I would love to be on the show.
We got to get you on the show because they love you. So we have to get you on one of these days. So, folks, I see some of you starting to roll in here to the show. So, welcome. And again, very excited about this next series of shows that we're going to be doing for Toxic Male Appreciation. Mother's Day gets a lot of attention, as it should. It gets a whole lot of attention. Father's Day sometimes seems like an afterthought. I don't know if it's kind of like the whole gift giving thing. Like the joke is like Dad gets a tie every year. It's just like I have a tie like every like every year for Father's Day. It's not as gift heavy of a holiday, but it used to still be as fun and important and and reverent. And it seems like of late, Father's Day and fatherhood in essence has been kind of like downplayed a lot, minimized, and in a lot of cases demonized as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that fatherhood has been overlooked and passed by, especially single fathers who, are
Absolutely.
trying, to raise their families and, having a difficult struggle with that. It's almost as if they don't exist.
Hmm.
So I think it's very difficult for a father. And, there are fathers also who don't live with their children.
Right.
I acknowledge that as well.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they're kind of passed on the side. So there has been this kind of, neglect, so to speak, of, the role of the father, just in general. And primarily one of the roles of the father is that of protection, something
Definitely.
that, has kind of been pushed aside in the sense of you don't need a man kind of thing. And which is unfortunate because it's a situation that for in this particular circumstance, we appreciate fathers. So, we're just
Hmm.
trying to show in this particular example that there are fathers and sons out there who have these fantastic relationships, not just in on the screen like in DS9, which is one of my favorite father and son
Absolutely.
relationships between Cisco and his son, but also in real life and in Hollywood, Lorena.
Absolutely. And it's something that I feel isn't spoken of enough, in Hollywood. And in a lot of these cases, some of the actors that you see, these like father son actors that are there, a lot of them, their backstories are something that every person can relate to. So that's why we're so excited about this series to tell you guys. And the one father and son duo that we are doing for this show is, of course, John David Washington and Denzel Washington. Now, I have to be honest with you. For I don't know what happened, but I did not know that John David Washington was Denzel's son. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know of him until I went to see Tenet. And then all the press after that was like, "Oh, that's Denzel Washington's son." I said, "Wait, what? Have you seen Tenet at all?"
I have not seen Tenants. Have you seen it, Lorena?
I have seen Tenet. For people who don't know, Tenet was a Christopher Nolan film. It was like a sci-fi slash time travel film with horribly bad sound editing. I don't know what the heck happened, but yeah, the sound editing was crap. The concept was very kind of like out there, but it was still a fun watch to me. I actually enjoyed watching it. And for people who remember way back in the day when the pandemic was raging, it was one of the post-pandemic, or within the pandemic, I should say, films that released in theaters. So that was also a big deal. I did go see it. It was interesting because I just wanted to kind of go in and go and enjoy the experience. But I was just impressed with his acting talent. I didn't know he was Denzel's son. I did not know that. The only thing I knew is that with his range in the movie, and it was just great. It was a challenging thing to act at the same time. So that's where I first saw I first saw him.
Well, Lorena, Tenet, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it not the sequel to Inception, which is another science fiction movie that is very kind of, it has to do with certain levels of perception and reality. And so it was not an easy film to necessarily throw into the pandemic at a time when, the climate was not at its peak when it, or anywhere really, we were kind of neither here nor there. And it's kind of hard to throw out a film like that. I think that, the film that won Film of the Year called Coda, people wanted to
Mhm.
see, things that were more like a happy story kind of movie. And, Tenet wasn't that kind of a story. It was, it was a science fiction film, which was extraordinary from what I understand. And you did mention that the sound quality was not the best, which was something that's a huge faux pas. And you notice right away in a studio production when that
Mhm.
sound is off. But it didn't stop anybody from noticing that, John David Washington is a star. I mean, he's in the film and he stands out quite a bit. And I just think that I had no idea that he was Denzel Washington's son either. It was quite a surprise. And I think that he wanted to kind of keep it. I'm not going to say that's entirely true, but I suspect he might have not wanted to necessarily be associated with his father entirely. Maybe wanting to make a path of his own.
I would have to agree with you. Hey, Kaylee, good seeing you, my dear.
Hey.
Good seeing you. I think I would have to agree. Almost like, not that it's father and son, but Nicolas Cage. He didn't want anyone in Hollywood to know that he was Francis Ford Coppola's nephew
Right.
because, the Coppola name is, ubiquitous in Hollywood. It's kind of like, you know what, I just want to make it, you know, um, on my own talent, which is very commendable because the whole acting game, I should say, for lack of a better term, is crazily competitive. So people are trying to get any angle that they can. So to kind of say, I don't want to ride on the coattails of my famous family. I want to kind of, make it on my own. Kind of like Bryce Dallas. I
Yes.
didn't know her last name was Howard for a long time.
Yes. Yes. And she does resemble her father. I mean, there's no doubt about it. That's his
Mhm.
daughter. One of the first things that I saw John David Washington in, and of course, as I mentioned, I didn't know that he was the famous son of Denzel, was a show called Ballers. And I might have brought up the show
Ooh,
before Lorena. The
you
show
know, let me find it because
stars
I've
The
heard of
Rock,
it.
and it's on HBO. And HBO is known for making sort of these cutting edge shows about entertainment or things surrounding the entertainment industry, like uh, they made Entourage. They made
I loved Entourage.
oh, it was so good. I think they also made another show about a sports agent. I can't remember the guy's name, but that was a famous show. And then they also made Dream On. So they kind of do these cutting edge original series that talks about the entertainment industry. And in this particular case, it is sports related, but you know, people, you know, the Ballers program, which
There
is
he is.
which stars The Rock as well as John, is absolutely incredible. I have to say that I love what they've done with it and had done with it. I think it may be in hiatus now, but I watched that show religiously. And it was quite a fantasy trip because, you know, when you think about the life of these athletes and what they go through in regards to making money and what's going to happen and, you know, how does this work for them? And what is their lifestyle? What is the lifestyle like? You know, it was around the time that they started to make these reality shows, Lorena, like, you know, WAPs, which are women and I think women, girlfriends and wives of professional athletes, or even sort of like these Real Housewife reality shows.
Oh, Basketball Wives.
Right, basketball.
Yeah, I remember that.
And shows like that where you had an incredible, there's always going to be interest in basketball players. I mean, let's just face it, and football players in the United States. There's always going to be interest. They're always going to be in the spotlight, you know, and even the draft for the amateur players, if you will, if you really want to call them amateur players, let's just say the players who don't get paid as much, but haven't become professional yet, so to speak. There's interest in them. Even the draft has become, you know, a major event for them. So, you know, which I think we just had a few weeks ago. And I have to say that there's a huge amount of interest in this lifestyle, in the celebrity way. And, you know, it's a very interesting show. I love the show. I had no idea that this character was in it. He was wonderful in the show. But the other program that I saw him in, and I also didn't realize that it was him, was Spike Lee's Black Klansman.
Yes, that one. I didn't know that he was in.
Yeah.
And I heard so much about him when I first went to look up who John David Washington was. I'm like, oh, wow, he was in this movie?
Yeah.
So I haven't seen it yet. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's about I haven't seen it in a little while, but it's about
I'm gonna mute here.
An FBI agent who wants to bring down the Klan, and he has to do it through phone conversations, more or less, because he can't let his let's say undercover status be shown. And so he essentially, you know, of course, it's a play on words, a Black Klansman, but essentially that's what happens. He's using his ability and prowess as an investigator to bring down and infiltrate and expose Ku Klux Klan, a Ku Klux Klan chapter where he lives. And it's very clever. And I believe it's based on a true story. And I also think that it shows what you can do with certain tools. For example, Lorena, there are many of us on YouTube and on Twitch who don't show our faces. You know, you don't know what those people look like on the other side. And so it's not so far or too far of an imagination that you could have in regards to who is actually on the other line. So I think it was very clever. Spike Lee is always doing these clever avant-garde films that I think are just remarkable. And the year I think that he made Black Klansman, I think that Spike Lee was, or it might have been last year, he had kind of been the talk of the town of Cannes, and you know, he kind of accidentally announced who the winner of the
I remember that. I remember that.
And no one seemed to care because it's Spike Lee. He's reinvigorated the movie industry with his films that depicted, let's say, life in the Northeast, if you will, for a good portion of his films.
Mm-hmm.
At least as far as I'm concerned, and that lifestyle that everybody is quite fascinated with, but was largely ignored. So Hollywood was not necessarily interested, and nor are they interested in Black Klansmen. They truly are not interested in telling these stories, which I think are fascinating stories. And it is part of our history, so it certainly is mesmerizing. When you even hear the title of the film, you're
Mm-hmm.
wondering, well, what is this about? I think that to go ahead and decide to make a film like this or star in a film like this does say a lot about the actor, because there's a lot that you could desire to be in and star in, but I also think it takes a certain approach in your career that you want to have. And certainly the son of Denzel Washington, Denzel himself, who has accomplished so much over the past, 60 years now,
A lot.
that, his father's a hard act to follow, but honestly, John David, who's an accomplished athlete himself, apparently from Morehouse, certainly is setting, an incredible precedent for someone who has incredible talent, either as an athlete and as an actor. And who knows how far John David will go. He's so early in his career, Lorena.
He's extremely early and young in his career. And actually, because I was reading this article here, because he was, a football player and like in the NFL, he said that he actually stayed in professional football longer than he should have, because he didn't, it's like he was fighting against getting into acting, and he would have gotten into it earlier, but he just felt that being compared to his father, just kind of wrestling with that. It's like, if I go into acting, I'm going to get compared to my dad. You know what? Guess what? I'm over here. I'm playing football. I'm doing my own thing. I'm going to do my own thing. Even though I want to act, I'm going to do my own thing, until it finally got to a point where he was like, yeah, okay, I'll finally get into acting and accept the fact that, I have this famous dad, but this is what I want to do. So it's one of those things. It's like, you just have to suck it up and go. Suck it up and go for it.
Yeah, and I think that he was, that Spike Lee film was very lucky film to get into. The Tenet film was also a film that a lot of people have been waiting for so long, and I think that Tenet, when they get those sound issues corrected, may end up being kind of a cult classic, if you will, for the community. So I think that a lot of people will look at that in a different way going forward. But certainly during that time period was not an easy time to make a film. But he managed to have Tenet released, which I believe was filmed before, the 2 years where we weren't.
Yeah,
we
it was.
I'm not going to say what it is. 2 years where we couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
And then he also made another film during that time, supposedly in secret, with Zendaya, that a lot of people were talking about. And the film, what is the name of the film?
Does it sound familiar? Was it Malcolm and Marie?
Yes, it is Malcolm and Marie. And, they talked about how they made the film, and it's kind of in secret, and, it looks very sultry and seductive. I haven't really seen Zendaya like this before. It was produced by the same guys who made Euphoria, which was a very, look at this, madly in love. Yeah, this is hot. Look at this.
Is this all in black and white?
Yeah, I think it is a completely black and white.
Oh my gosh, that just adds a vintage quality to this. I mean, this is watch this.
We have seen Zendaya kind of in a different light ever since she was in the last film of the Spider-Man film, but I think in this film it shows her true potential. I want to see her in so many films like this, and I think that together, she has stepped more, not that she isn't a woman, but she stepped more into womanhood in Euphoria, as well as in this film, Malcolm and Marie. I love drama and I love romance. I think that something like this shows the potential of both of them. I want to see more films like this from both of them and see where this can go. Between the two of them, certainly could use some more romance out there, Lorena.
I am going to have to put this on my list because I love how this looks. One of the reasons why, and again to flow back into his father, one of the reasons why Denzel was so popular on screen is that he looked like that hot, desirable, romantic interest that you wanted to be with, and his sex appeal was such a part of why women, like were drawn to him in so many roles. And I'm forgetting the Spike Lee movie that he Mo Better Blues. That's what
Mo
that
Better
well.
Blues, the trumpet player,
The
Mo Better Blues.
that was somebody's. Oh man, when as soon as he licked his lips before he played that trumpet, man, I was done. Absolutely, done when I saw that. So I will definitely have to check this out. That's very,
Yes.
very interesting. Again, like you're saying, he's very, very young in his career.
Yes.
So to speak. So this is great. Okay, so that's Malcolm and Marie, and he's in a couple of other things.
Yes.
So the piano lesson, I've heard of this one. For some reason, this sounds very familiar. Samuel L. Jackson is in it.
Nice. Very
Following the
nice.
lives of the Charles family as they deal with themes of family legacy and more in deciding what to do with an heirloom piano. Oh, okay. So there's a play by that too. Okay. And it's in pre-production. If it lands on a Hallmark channel, it's gonna do gangbusters.
Of course. And there's a reason why Hallmark is still making movies. I mean, this is an unprecedented time where we're seeing a lot of former A-list or let's say current A-list actors who were making Hallmark films like we've never seen before, because people want to see these actors and they don't care what the story is. They just, well, let's say women, because primarily Hallmark, it's a female crowd who are watching those films. But
exactly.
I'm loving every minute of it. I mean, so I think it has a lot to offer. And I think that he will go far. And Samuel L. Jackson, I guess, maybe playing the patriarch in the film.
Ray Fisher is in it. This is why I've heard of this movie.
Yes. There are a lot of, celebrities in this film that we know and love. This is going to be a good film. This is going to be a really good film. And of course, as you said, it was based off of a play. I think that's August Wilson is a famous playwright. I can't remember everything that August Wilson has written, but is a very well-known playwright. And so this is going to be amazing. And I hope they continue with this mode of taking these classic stories and making them, whether it's on Hallmark or Netflix or wherever. I think that that's definitely something that is going to be wonderful for us to see him in.
Oh, I certainly do hope so. Hello, BK Panther. I see you there. He says, hello, ladies. Hello.
Hello.
And thank you for being here, BK Panther. Let's see. I have got some video.
Yes.
Here that I kind of wanted to show. Let's see. We'll go with this first one here. And it's very interesting because Denzel says here, Denzel Washington didn't realize his son John David was an actor. So I may have to EFAP this a little bit.
Did he always want to act? Was it something that you encouraged him to do, your son John David? Or was it something that you said, listen, no?
My wife said everybody could see it but me.
You know what? That That's interesting that he said that, because it seems like, and I'm sorry if I'm stereotyping here, but it is a little true. It seems like mothers are more tuned in to the dreams and aspirations of their children. It's kind of like the fathers see it, but because they're not like a nurturing type of role, they're not as plugged in. It's like, it's pretty much, the wife says, hey, so and so is interested in this, your son's interested in this. Okay, well, how much is it for baseball lessons? All right, okay, cool, I'll just make sure you have to check for that. And and they're at the games, but there's some interest that sometimes they may not feel comfortable telling their fathers because they may disapprove. Like, I know a couple of friends, like one friend of mine, he wanted, to be a cartoonist,
Mhm.
and his father did not approve of that at all. So he kind of kept that under wraps, and that was a bone of a lot of contention between himself and his father. But the more he worked on it, the more he followed, like this path, and like funded for himself to go to art school, and, was doing very well, it kind of reconciled to his father, because his father could like see how talented he was. And he's like, I'm so sorry that I didn't support you then, as I should have. Because he was like, yeah, my mom knew, my mom would encourage me to do this, but my dad did it. So this is interesting. And he's like, my wife saw it, but I didn't see it. It just
Mhm.
went on my head.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Really?
I
Oh, wow.
well, it's interesting because I wanted to be a pro football player. I didn't make it. He made it to the NFL.
See, I didn't know. Did you know Denzel Washington wanted to play football?
Yes. 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 And that's why it was so ironic that he was in Ballers, uh, starring in a story that deals with people in professional sports. So at least for me, I felt it was ironic that he would act in something like that. But yes, because he went to Morehouse, and did very well, as a football player there. So yeah.
It just blows my mind that Denzel Washington wanted to play football.
Yeah, but that's why I kind of like Ballers, because there's so many young men who wanted to be professional athletes. Basketball, football, baseball, whatever it is. A lot of
Hmm.
them wanted to and would have done, had they not had injuries, or, something else got in the way.
Hmm.
So, we certainly do see a lot more of the lives of these young athletes now. But, when Denzel was coming out, and this might be 1980, you never
Hmm.
even knew much about, those athletes. You just didn't know anything about them unless you were from that town and you remember them from high school. But now it's quite publicized, and we know everything about these athletes now. But
Hmm.
Morehouse is known for producing excellent football players, in addition to their academic programs, which are stellar. So,
Hmm.
I think that it's quite a funny thing that his son ended up being an athlete as well as an actor, who's really just kind of doing incredibly well right now.
Extremely well. And to kind of give some folks a little background in case you don't know about Morehouse. Morehouse is a historically Black, all male college, known for, oh my gosh, producing so many doctors, lawyers, engineers. It's just like an absolute top school. Very, 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 very well known. So, read into its history. It is a very interesting institution. First came about after Reconstruction, after slavery ended. So you had the men's college, which was Morehouse, and you had the female college, which is Spelman. So read
Yes,
into
and
that. It's interesting
And they are
reading.
two very well-known, traditionally Black colleges in the United States, that have continued around for a long time and have long traditions here in the U.S. So it is also good to see that as well.
Mhm.
And the other thing I was going to say about him is the idea that, you know, kind of getting into a Spike Lee film isn't the easiest thing to get. But it seems like his son has had some minor roles in some of Denzel Washington's films, Lorraine, from what I'm looking at.
Mhm.
For example, one of my favorite films of Denzel Washington's is a film called The Devil with a Blue Dress, and that is a film noir film. Yes, it is fantastic. It stars Denzel, of course, and of course, it's written by Walter Mosley, who we all know. Everybody's trying to hire Walter Mosley, but I think most recently he was kind of chased out of a writers group because they didn't want him to, you know, put in his information. You know, he's the writer, but they
Mhm.
didn't like his ideas. But he's such a classic writer, very easy to read and watch stories that make great films, like Devil in a Blue Dress, where Denzel stars in with Jennifer Beals, who's the femme fatale in the
Mhm.
film. And the film was just absolutely, you know, fantastic. And when I saw that film, I just remember thinking to myself, you know, this is kind of, you know, a breakthrough film, because it's nice to see these sort of noir films with a Black cast there. I mean, we're seeing more of that now, but in
Mhm.
1995, it was pretty rare to see that. So it really was amazing, an amazing film. And apparently he was in the film as a child, or one of the characters there.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so he's made some appearances. He was also in the film Malcolm X with his father, and the Book of Eli. So, you know, apparently he's had a few on-screen appearances, I guess, in minor roles. But it is very interesting to think about this, because I think that he is someone who just has an incredible talent. And of course,
Mhm.
as you saw, just even from that short clip where he was starring in the film with Zendaya, Malcolm and Marie, he has incredible stage presence, incredible screen presence. I think it's even more prominent and more obvious in Black Klansman for him. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, you know, I think that him being able to carry something like that, you'd have to carry that film yourself. You can't, that's not something he could rely on anyone else with. You have to be able to carry a film, and that's not the easiest thing to do, you know, especially so early in your career.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like even in Tenet, he carried that film as well, just with the presence of who he is, you know, as the, you know, as the protagonist when you're watching, you know, this film. It's like it's I don't even know how to explain it, because I didn't know that he was Denzel Washington's son. I was basically, you know, who is this, you know, this actor, this young actor who has so much gravitas to pull this movie along, not just any movie, but a Christopher Nolan movie. Stunts where there were movements he had to do backwards. The hand-to-hand combat scenes in this movie where he had to do them were absolutely freaking fascinating. It was, you know, it was just great to see. So I'm excited to see what more he's going to do in the future, because he is, you know, he's got great acting talent. And again, comes from an comes from an acting family. So cannot wait to see more from him. I'm gonna play a little
Absolutely.
bit
His
more.
future is incredibly bright, Lorena, and we're going to see him for many years to come going forward. And Denzel himself, it's very hard to know where to start with Denzel, because he is such an extraordinary actor.
He oh my gosh, he really is. He really is. It's like where do you start? Where do you
Yes,
start?
and
We'll
well,
start at the beginning.
we will start in the beginning, but I do want to say as an aside that as recently as 2022, Denzel was nominated for an Academy Award. I think it was for Best Actor in a film he starred in, which was a film adaptation of Macbeth. And
Really?
Yes,
How did I
yes.
miss that?
Yes. So, he was there at the Oscars. He did not win, because it went to another actor,
Mhm.
another African American actor who won for Best Actor. But Denzel's performance has been critically acclaimed and was the talk of the town, as as Macbeth in the play Macbeth. And so everybody was talking about it, and it was not a surprise that he was nominated for an Academy Award for that role. So he continues to be a contender, being nominated against the top actors, various times over the last 40 years, Lorena.
He is literally on what I would call the short list of actors within that period of time, with the most powerful performance being in Malcolm X.
Yes, he certainly did define for so many of us, which it was his Spike Lee production, right,
Yes,
Lorena?
yes.
He did
Hmm.
define for so many of us what would be considered a modern portrayal of Malcolm X in what I would call was a transformational role, where he, started out as Malcolm as a young,
Young
attractive,
hustler.
yeah, young, attractive hustler in Harlem, which was the it place for the next maybe 30 or 40 years at that time period, where people would go and want to hang out and
Yeah.
see the fantastic music. It's kind of like the Village now, or let's say the Village the way it was in the 80s, when people go to Harlem and see the best entertainment, some of the best,
Hmm.
partying that they could have, and see that whole culture at that time, the Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance at that time, to grow up there. And it really was an eye opener, because here it says it won 2 Oscars, as you have in front of us, Lorena.
Hmm.
Malcolm was a complex individual, like so many of these young Black men who were growing up at that time, who were faced with obstacles that just seemed insurmountable. Um, and I can't even imagine, growing up 100 years ago, which is essentially when it would be, right? 1930, when
Hmm.
Malcolm X was a young man. I wonder what Harlem was like in 1930, Lorena. I would love to go back in time and see that.
Harlem, it was like, how'd you say, from like everything that I've read, it was like the roaring 20s.
Yeah.
And even though Harlem was segregated, there was still all this art, literature, finance, just this such a vibrant community that it was known over the world of things that were happening, in Harlem. You had people who left the South to go specifically to go to Harlem, because it's like I could go there, I could be more free. I wouldn't have to, worry about, the KKK coming after me. It's just, it was it was like the promised land to go to, and um, just this vibrant place in the 20s. You have the Cotton Club,
Yes.
you all of that's what I think of, when I see that. And it was just so much going on and happening. And you have a lot of, you know, these Black Americans who probably like had parents or grandparents who were slaves, and had gone from that
Yes.
point to owning their own businesses, making their own money, in government and literature and all of this. And it was just an absolute, explosion. And that was where a lot of intellectual thought was coming out of, at the same time.
Yeah, it really was a magical place at that time. And like I said, Lorena, I'd love to travel back in time and just be able to walk around that area at that time in Harlem, just to witness some of what the life was like there. And we kind of get a wonderful sense of what it was like from Spike Lee's production. there in Harlem, and pretty much a lot of obstacles that many of the characters faced, especially Malcolm, who was alive during a time not just in the Harlem Renaissance, but at a time when change happened so dramatically in the United States, all the way up to, let's say, the 1980s, where we saw so many changes and so many things happen historically that changed the way our country is. And so, what I especially loved was the way that they showed him when he was young, and they were kind of hanging out and they were on the town, and it felt like the world was their oyster, but they did have obstacles in their way. And, if anything, Malcolm, when this film was made, Lorena, it was still somewhat controversial to even talk about Malcolm X.
It was very controversial, and I think a lot of it had to do with ignorance. And I think a lot of people just saw him as this, it's like segregationist type of person, when in reality, although that's how he started, that's not how he ended. And that's why I tell people, seeing this movie where you go from him being in the Nation of Islam and all of that, and how they did not, it's like, do not associate white people, don't want to do that. He goes on the Hajj to Mecca,
Right.
and he is around Muslims of all colors, all walks of life. And when he comes back from the Hajj, he's just like, I believe in the brotherhood of all men. And that put him at odds with the Nation of Islam. And you see what happens when his own people turn on him, because he's preaching this, message of unity. And a lot of people didn't understand that. And with Denzel's powerful performance, especially when he's standing sentry at the broken window, with that rifle, looking out, because his house had been firebombed by his own people,
Right.
and he had to protect his wife and his kids. And when you see that, and you see that transformation, this movie did a lot to make people not only understand who Malcolm X was, but understand the struggles that people like him were going through in order to participate in civil society, in order to protect their families, in order to provide, for their families. So you're right. It was a controversial movie, but so much uproar happened when Denzel did not win the Oscar for Malcolm X. I have never heard so much of a disappointment at the Academy when they did that.
Yeah, and I also think I'm going to take it a step further that, unfortunately, Spike Lee himself was quite, discriminated against by a lot of his work, which, is obviously groundbreaking and cherished and just honestly imaginative in a lot of cases. Like, for example, in Do the Right Thing, clearly the message is incredibly clear. It's about, doing the right thing by your neighbors and treating people with respect. But,
Right.
The scenario that he paints is essentially someone getting into an argument. And, how do you handle that? And in the Northeast, at least, where you and I grew up, let's say, we understood this because this would happen all the time.
All the time.
So I really think that he was trying to not just demonstrate that people do want to do the right thing, but also that this is part of our cultural makeup, is getting along with other people. And so, I think that Spike Lee's films, while are incredibly entertaining, also show that people can get along, even when things go bad. Malcolm X is such a great example of this as well. And I think that journey of his, which unfortunately, it's not a spoiler, but unfortunately ended up in his assassination. Like so many other people who were trying to change things for the better. And, in the end, that's what he was trying to do. And we lost a lot of leaders like that, who were on the path of, let's say, trying to make the world a better place. And so, that was something. And as you said, Lorena, there was an uproar when he did not win. And, I also think that, Spike Lee might have been one of the most revolutionary directors and writers out there at that time, and maybe for the past 20 years. He himself also witnessed a lot of that backlash.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the idea that Spike Lee would be the heading up cans with his Black Klansman, with the son of Denzel as the star, and sort of being, the talk of the town, and pretty much there was a word that they used to describe Spike Lee at Cannes that year in 2018. He was the master of ceremonies, and he pretty much, let's just say that a lot of the filmmakers there value his point of view, because they want to see something different and new and exciting and entertaining and meaningful. And pretty much all of his work encompassed that. And that's why Denzel was able to excel in it, honestly, because of the fashion and the way that Spike Lee wanted to present Denzel as Malcolm X in it. So, it had to take somebody who could handle all of these changes, Lorena. My goodness.
Yeah.
An entire lifetime of changes that Denzel has done. I saw him in another film, and I don't know whether it was before, I don't know whether it was before Malcolm X, but it was a film called The Mighty Quinn. And
I saw that. I saw that. You know how I remember that movie? Because it was, as usual, freezing in the Northeast.
yes.
And this movie was on, I forget which syndicated channel it was on. And it just felt so warm to watch. But yes, I do remember this movie. It was a Robert Townsend movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, the film, which was kind of, like a cop and robber story, and, the idea that the person he had to catch would constantly elude them on this tiny little island,
So young.
Yes, so young. And they even had, some rich lady who was always wanting to sleep with all the men there. And it was just, the whole thing was just a bunch of entertainment and fun, but it was also very serious, because there was a crime being committed, and murder, and, all sorts of stereotypical fun stuff. But one thing that I kind of liked about it was that they talked about class relations, and they didn't need to do that. They didn't have to do that in the film, but they felt that it was important. I remember Cheryl Lee Ralph saying, well, you'll never be one of them, and he's a very important person on the island. I mean, he's the chief of police. But he is not at the same level as, let's say, the governor of the island, and, these sort of class relation issues. And people cheering on, the Robert Townsend whenever he manages to evade the police, and everyone just kind of enjoying it so much. Island life, that whole approach, I thought was very clever. And while his accent wasn't perfect, I admit that, the accents were not perfect, but it was an entertaining film. And Denzel seems to take on these films like this. And I thought he did an excellent job in it. What did you think, Lorena?
I thought he did too. I thought he did an excellent job. This was a different sort of movie, not only just because of the setting, and I love this picture with him and Robert Townsend. Not only because of the setting, he had to actually put on a believable Jamaican accent.
Yes.
That just added another level, to it, because it's that's Denzel Washington, but that showed another level of talent when you're able to act through an accent that is not your own, and it just added such a level of authenticity to this. This was a fun, enjoyable popcorn movie to watch, especially if it's freezing, flipping cold where you are. You know, it had like intrigue, it had romance in it. It was one of those films where you didn't really see a lot of romantic films that, between black men and women. So this was again another one of those like rare nuggets that we got to see.
Yes, and Robert Townsend was absolutely infectious in this. His charisma, it was just pure charisma in that, because he was just like, yeah, man,
It's
like
a doofus friend when he played it just perfectly.
the
It
guy
was
is like, he paid me, and it's like, this is a $10,000 note. Do you realize
Mhm.
it's not even worth anything? And they're like, what do you mean it's $10,000? Like,
It's like the stuff that I have to deal, with
oh,
you, with you, with. But speaking of Robert Townsend also was rising in Hollywood, putting together his own like production company and producing
yes.
films like this that made money. I think he did this. Do you know if he did this before or after Hollywood Shuffle?
I think it was probably after. I'm
Okay.
not sure, but it is very interesting that Denzel chose to do this film. Robert
Mhm.
Townsend also made this film. He had to portray this person who was just so laid back, knew everything was going to be fine. Even in the end, they don't apprehend him, right, Lorena? Like, he gets away.
Yeah, he does. He does. It's like,
And they,
imagine if your friend is like a cop, but the perp is one of your best friends
yes.
from school. And
Mhm.
for people who don't know, when it's a small island like that, everybody knows
Knows everybody.
everybody.
Yes.
So, you arrest somebody, chances are, their mom was someone who you went to her house all the time, or,
That's
she
right.
may have babysat you or something like that. So it's like it brings in that whole different kind of dynamic
Yeah, and even
to it.
before cell phones, let's say, like when this film was made, there was, the lines of communication were on the island. Like, you knew when someone arrived on the island. That was, everybody
Mhm.
knew. There was no secret. And also the other thing too, is that you do know everybody on the island. So there isn't a day that goes by where you don't see somebody that you know. So I think that's extraordinary, especially, growing up where we did, where there's millions of people and there's a ton of people we don't know, that we would see on a regular basis. But the idea that you're always in a place where you know everybody, you're always going to see everyone. These are the same people over and over again. But something else that I also think was interesting was that Denzel also chose to play two other roles that were very different, and were
Mhm.
actually very good films. For Queen and Country, where he actually is a paratrooper, Black British paratrooper. So he's playing a Black British
Really?
man who grew up in Great Britain. And he joined the army because he wanted to escape poverty. But then he realizes that despite the fact that he has served in the military, that no
Mhm.
one, back in London, is treating him with dignity or respect. And I think that was a very interesting theme to take on. He could have done something with Vietnam, let's say the Falklands. It's not exactly Vietnam, but let's just say it happened maybe around the same time for British soldiers to deal with the Falkland Islands. So for him to take on this role was very different. And, he seemed to like to embrace the idea of different people being in different cultures. And I really do like that he did that. This was a great film. I think there's a scene in this film where he's trying to go to one other country, and they refuse him entry. And he says, "Well, I'm a veteran,
Right.
and they refuse to allow him to enter this where he wants to go." And so, we see this
Mhm.
rejection and vilification at that time, especially for Vietnam veterans. They were still being vilified in the
Yeah.
80s. So unfortunately, it was something that he was in and had to deal with that. And then the other film that I wanted to mention about him was that during that time, let's say, uh, before I go into glory, is a film called Cry Freedom, where he played Stephen Biko. And at that time, Lorena, apartheid was a
Mhm.
big deal. you know, and fighting against apartheid, which still existed in when that film was made, 1987, about Stephen Biko, who was an activist fighting against apartheid in South Africa, which was also a very interesting film as well. So Denzel definitely dipped his feet in the waters of international stories. And, you know, you couldn't get away from apartheid in the 80s and 90s. It was a front news story. And people couldn't believe that there was still that level of segregation going on in South Africa at that time. And so, you know, I thought that that was a very interesting story to want to be involved in. And he did a wonderful job as Stephen Biko in the film. Along with I think it was Kevin Kline who played the other gentleman in the story. So that was a wonderful film. Now, a lot of people, and I don't think you've forgotten, but you know, Denzel starred in a very famous film about the American Civil War called Glory.
Yes, that was. I think that was his. Was that his first Academy Award nomination? I think he was. I want to say he was nominated for this one, if I remember correctly, because this was a movie about a subject a lot of people didn't know about at all, and something that only I'd say within the past 5 years, with researching, you know, my own family, finding out about this.
Yeah, you make a good point, Lorena, and it was pretty clear that at this time in the United States in the 1980s, there were a lot of people who were unaware of, and I know I don't know every Civil War battle even now, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm a Civil War expert. I am not, but there were a lot of people who were unaware of African American soldiers during the Civil War. And you know what's ironic about this, Lorena, is that when you go to the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., there are monuments to African Americans during the Civil War, and in Boston as well. I think there's a special walk that you can do around Boston, and you follow these markers that take you to the hall, and then to this place and to that place. But then there are these specially made statues to African American soldiers, and they went out of their way to actually get the likeness of specific African American soldiers to put on these monuments. And you know, obviously at this point, you know, I think when the film was made, there seemed to be an awakening about what role soldiers had, not just in the American Civil War, but also in World War II. And so, you know, like the Tuskegee Airmen all of a sudden became a group of men who they wanted to acknowledge and you know, show their role in American history. Here we have African American soldiers who wanted to show their role in American history. And so, of course, this one focuses on the Civil War, but there were soldiers in many of the other wars as well. Denzel Washington and the other gentleman play soldiers who have so much dignity in this film, Lorena, but it's so hard to be treated so undignified, knowing what's at stake at this war. I mean, my goodness, could you imagine fighting a war knowing that your freedom depended on this?
It's hard to imagine. And from everything that I've read, it's the one thing that made them such formidable soldiers, because they knew what they had to potentially lose if they got captured by the Confederates. A lot of them were killed, a lot of them were tortured, but to them it was worth it, because freedom is what they would get. So for some folks who don't really know the history, when the Union Army would come in someplace in, you know, in the South, I would say, for example, South Carolina, because they had a Union blockade up and down the eastern seaboard. Like South Carolina, once the Union Army came in there, took over, a lot of, you know, slaves who were basically freed now at the time went to fight for the Union.
Right.
because they knew what was at stake, and they decided to go ahead and do that. It's like if it's a choice between, a lot of it also was employment also at the same time, but they knew what they had to lose. So it made them the most fierce fighters from everything that I've read. So this was just an amazing piece of cinema to watch. It was very innovative at the time, and a lot of not only just edutainment, but Denzel's performance in this is top notch. I would actually say the only thing that outshines his performance would be him as Malcolm X.
Yes, I agree. I think that it was very hard to kind of, how do you portray an African American from 200 years ago under these conditions? How do you do it? This is something that I think I would struggle with as an actor.
Mhm.
But clearly these men knew what was at stake, as you said, and you could just see what was happening. I mean, this was just so hard for them to uh, understand the unfairness that they're faced against, but to keep going. And this perseverance that they had was unbelievable. I think the soldier that led them was the actor from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, that was Matthew Broderick, which incidentally enough, because this was the Massachusetts 54th Regiment,
Right.
and a lot of slaves who escaped to New England actually joined that particular regiment. And yeah,
Oh,
Matthew
wow.
Broderick's character, he was born into a very how would I put this? A very well-to-do, if I remember correctly, well-to-do Cape Cod family.
Right.
So the fact that and here was the interesting thing. For as much talk as it was about abolition in the Northeast,
Yeah.
it was only about half support for abolition. The other half kind of just didn't want the boat to get rocked. So the simple fact that he decided to, it wasn't a problem for him going into the military, because they were just like, hey, Massachusetts needs to raise that right arm and go and quench this rebellion. But to say that you are going to go and lead a regiment of former and people who had like escaped to freedom in the Northeast, to say that you're going to lead that and teach them combat skills and arm them, that's something completely different. And you can see in the film just how his society had actually turned against him for even doing that. So yeah, this is a really great performance by Matthew Broderick as well.
Yes. And so, once again, Denzel's in another film where he's dealing. And of course, this is around the same time we got Amistad came out around this time too, right, Lorena?
I believe we did. Yes, another true story. It's interesting because when I was doing family research, like up in New England, let's see, where did it go? When I was doing family research up in New England, I actually found an issue of a newspaper. It's an abolitionist newspaper. I cannot freaking remember the name of it right now, but actually pulled up the article that had the case that they were following with regard to the Amistad.
Wow. Wow, that's unbelievable.
It
Um,
was
it seemed
freaking
like at
amazing.
that particular time there were a lot of films focusing on the history, as I said, not just in the military, but of African Americans and where they fell into our history as Americans. So,
Mhm.
uh, but I think that was a very special time where we got biopics like that, and of course, they were groundbreaking at the time, and they were 30 years ahead of all the stuff that we have now, where people are kind of boasting about how groundbreaking it is,
Mhm.
and we're like, no, no, there's something that came out 30 years ago that was
It was
that's
stuff so groundbreaking that there were people whose careers were put on the line, and I don't
yes,
mean like fly by night people. We're talking about the likes of, like, say, Steven Spielberg, putting their careers, on the line to say, yes, it is important for these particular stories to be told. But yeah, Denzel is right up there. There's so much that he's been in, and his, in his category
Yes.
of work. But even more so than that, Denzel has been one of those actors who's always seemed very down to earth. You usually see him out with his family, at least with his wife Pauletta. I can't even They're like always together. I just remember seeing pictures like of them out in Hollywood or like at the Oscars. It's always him and and his wife, and he would always portray himself as, I'm just a family man. I happen to be in Hollywood. He would record these commercials, because I remember seeing them for the Boys and Girls Club, where he
Yes.
would talk about, where he lived at the time. There really wasn't anything for the kids to do after school. And if I remember this correctly, one of the things that he found to that got him into acting, into a love for acting, was going to the Boys and Girls Club. So when he became a famous like actor, and when I lived in LA, you would always see him talking about just how much he cherished the Boys and Girls Club. He would donate money to the Boys and Girls Club. That was like his thing, and he was filming commercials and stuff for all of that. So this was like something that was rare to see, and kind of even rarer still to see, Black men in a nuclear family. And we'll just say, yes, nuclear families in general, but we're talking about Denzel Washington right now. But like a Black nuclear family, in Hollywood. And he's very happy, happy about that. And another thing that I associate with Denzel Washington is like all his quotes about being a parent
Yes.
and parenting. And he's like talking about, if you have kids, there isn't a style, it's a hybrid. And he said, it's what my wife and I learned from our parents: applying religious instruction, discipline, athletic activity, and academic excellence whenever possible. My wife's done a great job. She's been the consistent one, just trying to give them a normal life.
Absolutely. And I think that he's a perfect example of what you said, Lorena. He's an actor who has been responsible, loves his family, gives advice to people, and sets an example of something that we can all be proud of, for sure. And also, clearly from his choice of films, he chose to choose films that he felt, at least I believe, were relevant for the time.
Mhm.
Like, for example, he starred in Mississippi Masala, which was considered socially controversial as well, because
Mhm.
it's about a Black man and an Indian girl who have a relationship. They
Yes.
fall in love. It's a love
Mhm.
story. And he also stars in another film called Philadelphia, which dealt with the AIDS epidemic.
That
And
was one with Tom Hanks, right?
yes, where he defends Tom Hanks, as he's the attorney. Denzel is the attorney, and he defends Tom Hanks against a lawsuit where Tom Hanks is fired unjustly.
Mhm.
So I think that his decision to, I'll never forget the character he played in Philadelphia, because he kind of was looking at Tom Hanks, who had his boyfriend at the time, Antonio Banderas, in the story. And, I think it was maybe even at that point that people were starting to understand what the AIDS epidemic was,
Yes.
and, trying to accept what had happened and realize that everybody is affected by it, versus singling one population, which is what had been happening for a long time, the discrimination associated with it. But these were heavy hitter films, Lorena. I mean, these were statement films, I think, for the time. The Philadelphia came out in the 90s, and it dealt with homosexuality and HIV discrimination, people's impressions of what a homosexual is. And
Mhm.
they focused on, I think they did talk about the AIDS quilt, but there really hadn't been a film like that before that was a drama. We had seen like And the Band Played On, which focused on the AIDS story, but a lot of people didn't
Mhm.
want to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
No. No, they really did not. If I remember correctly, there was like a lot of controversy behind getting that movie made, and then when it finally came out and it did, so well, I think there was kind of this attitude like, you really should have supported this from the beginning.
Absolutely. And even I have to say that I was surprised that Tom Hanks took this role with Antonio Banderas.
Mhm.
I personally was very surprised that he would agree to play the role, mainly because of the controversy at the time. And I think it certainly did elevate Tom Hanks's career and maybe even Antonio
Mhm.
Banderas, let's say for an American crowd. But
Mhm.
who can forget Denzel, as this character in the courtroom saying, asking people like, are you a homosexual? Like the thought of anybody even asking anybody that so out front and open. He
Mhm.
realized, I remember in the movie, he says, we have to talk about this. We have to get it out. We have to talk about the real situation here. And
Right.
whenever someone got on the stand, he would say, are you a homosexual? Like now people ask this question all the time, right? You look at
Yeah.
celebrities and they're like, well, are you gay? Are you bi? Are you trans? Like this is a common occurrence now. But
Mhm.
in the 1990s, no one would ever ask that question. In fact, that would mean it was the end of your career if you were to be found out to be gay or lesbian. For a lot
Mhm.
of actors, that would be the end of your career. So,
Like the kiss of death.
yes. And so, even taking this, that's why I was just so surprised that Tom Hanks did that. I said, is this going to hurt him? I thought his career would be hurt by it. But their careers, fortunately, I don't honestly know if they were or were not, Lorena. I don't know.
It was for Tom Hanks, it was a risky role to take at the time just because of the stigma around AIDS, because there was a lot of ignorance at the time. It was kind of like you don't want to touch that. For Denzel, from what I see, it's like the fact that it's Tom Hanks that you're going to be acting with, it's like it's a win-win for you regardless. So that movie blew up, and now it's one of the classics that are out there. Hey, Steve Bax, 1964 says,
Hi.
hello, gorgeous gems of
Thank you
enchantment.
so
Oh, hello,
much.
hello to
Thank you.
you. And he also says, and I agree with him, now Denzel would make a cool James Bond.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it probably should have been something that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, he's kind of, I don't want to say a little too old for that, but it's kind of like that particular window has kind of passed for him. But yeah, in his younger days, definitely like his Man on Fire days,
Yes.
Equalizer. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
definitely.
Um, Absolutely. I think also he was in that film with the beautiful Whitney Houston called The Preacher's Wife. Do you remember this film,
I
Lorena?
do remember The Preacher's Wife. I do remember that.
And I thought, not only was he fantastic in it, but Whitney was fantastic in it. And I thought
Hmm.
that this was going to kind of like start up her career again because she was in, I think, The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and,
Hmm.
having this film with Denzel, and he plays an angel, of course. Um, it was wonderful. He was great in that. And I think it's like at that point, perhaps, that I started to realize that Denzel could probably play any role under the sun. This is a man who could tackle any issue, who could, embody what the character is supposed to have. And there aren't a lot of people
Hmm.
who can do that. I know that they named him as one of the most influential actors of all time, and it's not a surprise. His roles are timeless, and I
Hmm.
think that he definitely has kind of made a lot of history with what he's chosen to do with his career. But also, he was at one of the best looking actors in Hollywood, and probably still is, as an older man for a long time.
Hmm.
Definitely the best let's say People Magazine's most attractive, most handsome list of actors, and he kind of played it down a little bit. He wasn't necessarily so much so in, you know, kind of like those shirtless photos that we see today, where these young actors, or not just young actors, but many of these Hollywood male actors do, you know, like they're kind of, you know, requesting or encouraging them to be more exposed. But at a time where we didn't have that kind of exposure necessarily in Hollywood, Lorraine, for all male actors, he always had the sex appeal that just drove women crazy.
He really did. He really did. Shoot, my grandma would be like, "Is Denzel Washington on?" You know, he's good looking. Just like everybody. It's like your mom down to your grandma, down to your great grandma. It's like he was the, you know, the man that women wanted to be and that men wanted to, you know, to be like. He was, you know, he was just that type. But he was also just very candid, you know, about his life and growing up and like being a parent. Like this quote here where they asked him about on being real with his kids. He said, when my oldest boy was 14, I started to talk to him about some of the mistakes I made in life just to put a few dents in that shiny armor. And I think that's very realistic. One of I think the best things that you can do as a parent, and especially fathers to sons, mothers too, but you know, Father's Day, so we're gonna talk about that. Like fathers to sons is talking about the mistakes that you have made um in your, you know, in your life. You know, your children look up to you, but at the same time, it's like learn that it's okay to screw up in life. You're gonna, you know, you're gonna learn that, you know, no one is perfect. But I think that's something that's very candid and very, very honest, you know, to do. And again, when I say talk about it candidly, because unfortunately in Hollywood today, you'll see like the father is portrayed as an idiot and was like, don't do this stupid thing that I did, you know, and kind of leave it at that and just make it seem like the father's just idiotic as opposed to the father saying, you know, yeah, I did some stupid ish back in the day, but this is what I learned from this. And this is what you should, you know, learn from this. The father as, you know, that sage with experience as opposed to, you know, just being a clueless idiot and too much of what we see in entertainment today.
We certainly never saw Denzel portray any roles or take any roles that had that approach towards parenting or being a man, or, you know, his relationship with other women per se. He always
Mhm.
had respect, and I think that he just has so much class. You know, and for such an attractive man, he was very humble, Lorraine. You're very, very humble.
He was extremely, extremely humble. Um, you know, he never seemed, you know, full of himself at all. He just wanted to, you know, be relatable. Hope that, you know, you like what I put out, you know, the movies and the films that I put out there that hopefully, you know, you could, you know, relate to it. He was just great.
Yeah, he really was. And, you know, you would see him at different premieres, and he just was just so extraordinary. I think he really was a natural, having kind of a prolific career in stage and screen, a
Mhm.
natural for things like Shakespeare, which are not the easiest roles to play. You know, I think that there's a lot of actors who focus just on Shakespeare, and they're Shakespearean actors, and they, you know, they might spend their whole lives doing that, Lorena. But Denzel seems to be able to do both. So it is just amazing what he's capable of doing, even now at the stage of his life. And I think that that's also something to think about. He's also starred in films that were kind of these remakes of older films, like um, uh, The Manchurian Candidate. There was a remake of that, and The Taking of Pelham 123.
Mhm.
You know, those kinds of films, which I think they did okay. But he was also in that 2016 remake of The Magnificent Seven, which I have not seen. Have you seen it, Lorena?
I have not, and I heard that it was good, but I haven't seen it. I think here's my hesitation because I know the original. So anytime there's a remake, I am so like hesitant to check it out. I know it's a character flaw that I have, but but it's just one of those things. Once you see the original, it's like you're kind of hesitant to see that. But people have told me that it's pretty good, so it's gonna have to be on my list. And Steve Bax, 1964, also known as Lugnet Six. Hello, my dear.
Oh, hi.
Yes, that is indeed him. He says the man oozed charm and taught we men to be not only ourselves but better.
Definitely. I think that that certainly was something that he did and, continues to do. Just even looking at these honest quotes that we're looking at, Lorena, through the years,
Hmm.
having someone who, just honestly is a fantastic role model, and someone who, I think has made a difference, not just in Hollywood, but in the lives of his own family that seem to continue on.
Absolutely. Like I like the one where he says for role models, he says it starts in the home. If the father is not in the home, the boy will find a father in the streets. I saw it in my generation and every generation before me and everyone since. It's like he's being very, very candid about what happened, in his life. Of course, now you have some of the situations where the father is not physically present in the home, but maintains that kind of relationship so that while the father's not physically there, there's so much time spent with the child that it's just like, I know my dad would want me to do X, Y, and Z. I know that if I need to contact my dad, I can just pick up the phone and I can call my dad or text my dad or something like that. So I think around that is just like if there isn't a fatherly presence that is either related by blood or related by adoption or related some other way, they'll go find someone else, and it may not exactly be the influence that you want.
Exactly. And that's actually the thing that you want to avoid, because a lot of those influences are so detrimental, and not supportive, certainly not the way that, your father would be, or, let's say a person doing that role would be. Oh, there's another
Hmm.
comment from
Yeah.
Steve,
He
1960.
says, my dad was involved in wars and later on in working nights at a hospital. So my mom was also my father on those times.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's like that. So it's like that support and that support and backup.
Absolutely. So this is very interesting. He goes on to talk about this, some of the value
Hmm.
comments about positive influence we got from our parents. And I think that that's very interesting because this is a time, Lorena, where, positivity isn't so common nowadays, and encouragement is not so common nowadays. And I think that having that generation with their wisdom trying to instill that influence onto us can make a difference in people's lives, because we keep seeing shows and musicals about children who feel that they don't even matter, like nobody even knows they're alive. And that
Hmm.
influence, that positive influence from your parents, from your grandparents, or whoever does that, is what makes people realize that they matter and that they're important. And being around is important. Be existing, uh, like that musical Dear Evan Hansen, where he feels that he doesn't even matter. He's kind of, um, that
Hmm.
his existence doesn't matter. No one knows he's around. And I just thought that that was a very interesting, but we are seeing themes of that a lot, Lorena. Um,
Hmm.
not just in kids on social media, but in musicals and in movies. It's a huge problem.
It is, and it's heartbreaking because it's like I haven't seen a prevalence of that until recently, but this recent generation feeling as if, you know, I don't matter, feeling as if no one has a vested, interest in, whether I eat or not. Like when like my nieces and my nephews, sometimes I will text some stupid stuff. They'll text me stuff. Auntie, see this on TikTok. And when I would see them like in person, I'm always asking them questions. They're like, Auntie, why do you ask so many questions? I said, because I actually care about you and what you're, and what you're doing. And so many children, it's the idea, and I think this is the part that's been lost, the idea of in spending the time to invest in kids has been spent, somewhere else. And it's a shame. It's like they're not feeling that connection, learning how to connect in your community, learning how to connect within your family, whatever that particular family looks like. The importance of helping other people. There's so much of this, look at me, make sure I get the credit for this, make sure I get this many clicks, make sure you like this all the time, as opposed to spending the time helping other people. So this is like all great stuff. It's a very selfless thing, and that's something that I feel that we're definitely losing in our society, and especially when it comes to fathers, that idea of being the provider, being selfless enough to say that as long as my family is provided for, that's the most important thing, that I can have, as long as, my family's, taken care of and provided for.
Absolutely. And I also like that, you know, he felt the need to just kind of share what he learned with others. So he's not
Hmm.
just giving the positive influences to from his parents to his children, but to everyone. And I think he sees the need. I think he does see the need for people to hear this encouragement and support from others. And I think that that's very important as well. How do you bring up children in today's society? How does that happen? It's not easy.
No, it is not easy, because it seems that entertainment, everything seems to be more hostile towards children, trying to make them grow up much faster than than they need to. It just seems to be very hostile, and not allowing, kids to just be children.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something else too. And it is a part of growing up. You don't want the community to grow up too fast. I think we see a lot of that. They have some films where we do see that happening, and it is hard to watch children who kind of fall into that area. But clearly for Denzel, he sees the value in cherishing these moments with
Hmm.
his family, with his children, and realizing how much they do actually need that type of encouragement and that kind of raising that he feels is important. It's refreshing to see that, because we don't normally even see that from most people. Um,
No, no, we really don't. So I also think that, yeah, because of him being so candid with this, that's one of the things that's made him as an actor so endearing, like Lugnuts was saying, he made us, taught men to only be ourselves, but better. And I love when he talks about this, about work life balance. It's like his father always had like two or three jobs, and he was never home. But he's just like, I joined in as often as I could, and his
mhm.
kids knew that he was always trying to get home to be with them. And he tell them, you have school Monday to Friday, I have work. We both have our jobs to do. So it's like, you try to try to do that balance. Sometimes it's difficult, but you know, so the kids are usually much more apt to forgive the parents who try to be there than the ones who just, you know, I won't say never do, but some of them that are so blinded by what they have going on that they're not purposeful about spending time with the kids. And I love this last one with respect to perspective. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it's a heck of a down payment.
Yes, it is. It is necessary.
Yeah, it's like money doesn't buy. I heard money doesn't buy happiness, but at least you can put it on layaway. But I like this one. It's a heck of a. It's realistic. It's very realistic. Money isn't everything, but it's a tool. He's like you soon realize you can only drive one car at a time.
Yes. And I've heard so many people, and I'm going to say especially men, I don't want to stereotype all men, say that they do prefer their truck. Now, I don't know why they prefer their truck. It's a thing, like they prefer their truck. That's fine. Like I respect that.
Is it
But
because it like can like haul stuff and it's so much power in a truck and this is just me. I don't mean to cut you off. It's just me, but I know Aston Martin's very, very fast. It's very sexy. It's very aerodynamic, but it's like a truck has this powerful horsepower where you can, tow your boat, your RV, your motorcycles, whatever it is that you want to pull and haul it around town.
yes,
You get it dirty and don't care. Yeah.
yes, yes, it's true. It is very true. So it's that seems to be something that's consistent across the board in regards to the cars that men seem to, which is fine. That's great, and I'm happy that they have their trucks and everything.
Mhm.
And he talks about his children's success is what's important to him, and that he just won a Tony Award for a Broadway show. Another Oscar would be
Mhm.
nice, but he'd rather leave this earth as a successful parent than a successful actor.
I love that. I love that.
I love it too. I think that shows the type of man that he is. He truly
Mhm.
is a cut above the rest. And I don't. Normally I would say I wonder if we'll ever see another actor like Denzel. And I'm thinking to myself, of course, his son, who I suspect may have a similar career to Denzel's, especially with the work he's done so far. But
Mhm.
certainly the same values we're expecting to see. So it's just so exciting that the tradition is going on in the Washington family.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I kind of want to end on this clip here, which is Denzel Washington on fatherhood. I'm actually gonna try to make this widescreen, because he says some very poignant, very real things here, and especially with Father's Day coming up, I think this is very important. Now, to kind of preface this, while he's talking about Black men, obviously it applies to all all men. So I just want to get that out of the way right now.
Can you talk about African American men and how this movie speaks to them?
And just to quote Fences, I didn't see the movie. I saw the trailer.
Hmm.
And have you seen the movie Fences? I know it's a
Um,
play.
I have not seen it. I have to plug in my computer. I just realized it sent me a message. I'm sorry. I have
Okay.
not seen it. So I apologize. I have not seen Fences, but I heard that it was very, very, very good.
It's
um,
very powerful. Just the trailer that I saw. I remember seeing the trailer in the theater and people were like mesmerized.
wow.
And he's telling his son, you know, I put basically, he said, do I not put food on the table? Do you not have a roof over your head? He was like, you said, you need to worry more about being respected than loved. I'm paraphrasing, but it was very powerful, how he said that. So I have to see the movie. The play I heard is just amazing, but just that short clip of the trailer for Fences, I was just like, dang, I have to see this.
Pain is passed down from father to son and son to son. A lot of pain in Troy's life is a result of the pain and the damage from his father that he then visits on his son. We have to, as Black men, be mindful of that. Sometimes it's unfair, and sometimes we take it out on those we love. And I'm
And that's a good point, especially when it comes to fathers. Fathers have so I mean, mothers do too, but fathers also have an equal influence on their children, and a lot of times it's kind of difficult to not let the bad things that have happened to you get passed on to your children.
I'm guilty of that frustration that we all have. But we have a responsibility and a duty to be fathers, not to just make babies, but to be real fathers. And you can't expect any good to come to you if you don't visit any good on your son or your daughter. So be a man.
Wow.
It's very, very powerful. The notion of the level of responsibility you have towards your own children or towards others. Um, and we talk about kindness. We talk about, being part of this community, Lorena.
Mhm.
What does it mean when you are part of this, let's say this fandom that we're all part of, and what we do does affect everyone. Being kind and, pushing that idea of having respect for others does go
Mhm.
a long way, and it does make a difference, and we do have a responsibility for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, with this Father's Day coming up, just want to give props to all of you out there, all of you dads, whether you're single dads, whether you're married, whether you're divorced dads, whether you're separated dads. I'll even throw this in here, even if you're pet dads. Not that this is equal to children,
Mhm.
but the same thing. But take some time this Father's Day to just love on your kids the best way that you know how. And a huge props to those of you dads out there who are doing the job that your father didn't do for you. So
Yes.
huge props out there. And we got your back here on this show.
We do. We appreciate you and we support you. And thank you, as Lorena says, for doing that, going that extra mile, making that effort to make a difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hello there, Real Wade Nation Gaming. So good to see you. So, folks, with that said, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Toxic Male Appreciation Show.
Mm.
So glad that you're here to join us. Next week, we are going to be talking Clint and Scott Eastwood.
So
Yes,
exciting.
another father and son duo that we're going to be talking about. So yes, so very very excited about that. So thank you folks so much for hanging out with us. I'm the Reina Creole, and of course here we have her of Positive Fandom. Please do follow the both of us on Twitch here. We sure do appreciate it. Yes, he is Clint Eastwood's pretty freaking awesome. And we will see you next time. Take care. Bye.